Hi, my name is Bridget Estep, and I'm the Center for Public Lands Director in the Clark Family School. And it's a really great job because I get to interact and mentor and cheer on and learn from students. And these four are high on my list of people that I have learned from in the last bit. And really, what comes to mind when I saw they named their session Evolving Conservation Pathways Through Storytelling and Planning, it really made me think about the potential of what students in the Clark School do and how they really come here. They engage in classes, they learn from each other, and they really change the world through their projects and through their thinking. And I think that we've seen that a lot today. So I'm really excited about hearing Paige Atkinson's Mars. How do you say your last name? Charlebois, Bianka Martinez, and Caleb Park talk about their projects and tell their stories, and really they're planting seeds for the future. It is going to go the same way that all of the other panels will go. So each person will have 5 minutes for an introduction, and then 12 minutes each with 3 minutes for questions, and then we'll have a 10-minute panel afterwards. With that, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you all for showing up. I am Caleb Park. This is Bianca. This is Paige, and this is Mars. And the introduction to our panel is evolving conservation pathways through storytelling and planning. So taking a little bit of a different approach, not as big research based, but a little different approach to conservation. And so we each came up with some words that, keywords that were in all of our presentations and all of our projects. And so mine starts off with stewardship. And stewardship is the act of responsibly managing and caring for natural resources in order to sustain them for future generations. In conservation, that means recognizing that landscapes like the Brazil Ranch aren't just spaces to protect, but living systems we have to actively tend to through things like restoration, thoughtful access, and ecological monitoring. True stewardship blends science with ethics and education with action. By engaging students, community members, and researchers in the shared responsibility, we gain more of an understanding of what it means to live with nature.
So my key words are diversity as resilience. The federal administration, as well as all of our favorite word, is in there. And I'm going to be framing my project as how conservation doesn't happen without the power of people. Conservation work right now, especially during defunding, climate skepticism, and continuing and worsening climate crises, needs biodiverse workforces in order to build resilience for the future.
My keywords are pathways to career readiness. And building off of what Bianca was talking about, ensuring that folks know how to find themselves in those careers and have the skills necessary to leave Western or leave school with a degree that is truly helps them to be career ready, while also being agile and being able to respond to changes in larger stewardship career systems.
And my words that I brought into our introduction are human dimensions, especially in natural resources. Looking at human dimensions, it's the way that humans are solely part of conservation as a whole. When you land manage, you're not just land managing the landscape, but you're working on creating those relationships and managing the relationships from the people to the land. And then those relationships could look like a rancher managing their grazing opportunities that they have on their land, or a recreationalist using the public lands that we have here in the Valley or elsewhere in the US, and speaking on their experiences, or just having an emotional connection to the land that they love to recreate on. And from there, we'll move into the first presentation. Hello, my name is Marissa Charlebois. I am a MEM candidate and I was involved in the integrated public lands management sector of this program. My project is on building a strategic approach to a recreational nexus here in the Upper Gunnison Valley. This is an overview of my presentation. We'll first start with a site history, moving through a bit about my project and how I conducted my project, leading to the site plan that is now ending my project, as well as what my future steps look like. So the space that I decided to work on for this project is actually a land trust parcel up in Crested Butte. This picture on the left shows a great example of the landscape scale of this space. In the late 1800s, this space was actually a mine used for grit labor and also the end of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad rail. The picture on the right shows an example of this mine. It was called the Anthracite Mine. Today, it looks a lot different. It's used as a recreational hub for the valley. A lot of people recreate here, whether it be a visiting tourist or somebody that has lived in the valley for decades. This space gets used by a multitude of different types of users as well. And it connects to a large portion of the public lands here in the Upper Slate River Basin. The project summary, my deliverables, I had 5 deliverables going into this project working with the Crested Butte Land Trust. We were looking at visitor use, so quantifying what that looked like at the site, and also gathering a committee together to be able to look at how we want to envision the site in the future, looking whether that be at safety, accessibility, and just conserving the watershed and the riparian area that the space has access to. With that committee, we coordinated about 4 meetings within the late summer of 2024. And moving forward from that committee, we built a site improvement plan, which is in its draft stages. And then also a goal of mine throughout this whole project was looking into potential funding sources as well for future project implementation. A little bit about a background for recreation management. We looked at 3 different assets in this space, whether that be human, natural, and the systems. Human, looking at the personal experience people have at this space. Nature, just looking at the wildlife in this space, or the hydrology and the way the river moves, and then also the trees, etc. And then the systems, how the humans interact with this space, how they coexist, and that recreation and conservation can find a balance was our primary goal of this project. And then I have a definition here of visitor use management. It's really looking at managing the characteristics of the space through the natural and managerial setting, and then also taking into consideration what your resource conditions and experiences are preferred at the site. One of our main goals of the fall after our committee meetings was notifying a bit of desired conditions. These desired conditions were influenced by this diagram right here from the Visitor Use Management Framework run by the Interagency of Visitor Use Management Council, which is a council of multiple different types of federal agencies coming together to build a framework to better find success in recreation management in our public lands. With these desired conditions, we took on values both from the public and then also from our committee, and were able to develop values that we could appreciate into site improvements that would reduce our risk and uncertainty, and then also controversy if we decided to build this site improvement plan without communicating with outside stakeholders and also recreating groups in this public space. The recreation opportunity spectrum was also observed throughout this period of the project, looking at it through a lens of solitude and then also equity in this space. We used this framework that was built in the 1900s to kind of balance where we find Gunsight Bridge in the space of solitude and then also equity. We have about 8 summer recreationalist style users, and then also in the wintertime there are additional users as well. This is a map. In the red, you can see where the site is located. It's a little bit northwest of the town of Crested Butte. It's about 120 acres. I'm guessing a few of you, if you're from around town or in the Upper Gunnison Valley, you visited the site. the gun site bridge parcel. It is well known for the structural bridge that passes across the Slate River at the location. And then this is just zooming in on that display of the red boundary where our site is located. You'll notice, let's see. The icons with the arrows are all pointing out areas of entry for this site, though it is not a hotspot, as you can see in the red, where recreation is actively occurring. It is also a spot to be considered where recreation could be higher with larger populations of people passing through that spot, whether that be eroding trails or just trying to manage the space well for accessible use. Starting out in the summer of 2024, I've actually was in a position called the Conservation and Recreation Ranger with the Crested Butte Land Trust. This was my second summer in this position, so I've grown to know and love the site that I worked on for my project very well. We ended up setting up 3 trail cameras, 1 trail counter, and then also a floater survey that occurs yearly outside of this project. And new to this project was a 2-week intercept survey where I spoke to people that were roaming across the site and just talked with them about their use of the site, how often they visit, and some of the values they appreciate, and maybe some of the things that they'd like to see changed at the place. Overall, in the summer of 2024, we counted 44,000 users on our trail counter. That trail counter was placed at a location that's not observing all types of users, but most users that were actively recreating, such as like biking or hiking along a roadway. And then this data will be used continuously in future years to adapt to more management plans at the site. The 2 pictures on the right, the one at the top is our trail counter, and then the one on the bottom is just a picture of one of the examples of use that we observed at the site that tended to turn a light switch on about concerns of safety at the space. The black truck in the back was letting out a user that was older age that needed support and couldn't access the site from where our trailhead parking was. So they had brought the van down to the location, but unfortunately they parked right in front of the main access trail that leads you down to the bridge. So it's just an issue waiting to happen. Nobody got hurt, but bikers love to ride down the trail. You can kind of see the trail off and to the right there. These next 2 tables are taking that 2-week intercept survey that I conducted at the site and breaking them down into looking at appreciated values, which would technically be those visitors' desired conditions at the site, and then recommendations for site improvements. In the green, you'll notice in the first appreciated values, I accentuated emotional connection because I find that if you're a first-time visitor at the site, or you visited that site even though you don't live here in the valley for like 10+ years, everybody had a story to tell of this place. So I found that that was one of the most inspiring ones that I was able to have a discussion about with the people that I surveyed. And then recommendations for the site improvements. They can stray from parking improvements to trash and restroom facilities, and also crowding and traffic. This is what I highlighted, identifying a safety concern. Some of these values that people wanted to recommend due to the fact that this location not only is owned by the land trust, but has a conservation easement attached via the town of Crested Butte. Some of these cannot be fully implemented. So we took recommendations, but unfortunately not everything can be put into action. Next steps after surveying and taking a couple summers of data was creating our committee. We overall have 15 committee members at this time, and we conducted 4 meetings in the fall of 2024. 2 of the meetings were intro meetings, and then 2 were on-site meetings where we came to the site and we were able to walk around. This is a picture actually of one of the first meetings we had at Gun Site, where we were able to discuss and have open discussion about what we'd like to see at the space, what we enjoy about the space, and what our dream gun site bridge parcel would look like. These next 4 bullet points are also discussing the committee goals, such as identifying current challenges and then looking at resource allocation and amenity management at the space, trying to make it more inclusive and equitable for both the natural and human aspect of the system that's in the region. This is the systems diagram from those committees that we were able to create. We stuck to 3 principles or characteristics for the systems diagram, as you can see right in the middle. We have restoration, accessibility, and safety. This will carry on into future slides, but for now, we're just going to break it down to one branch of this because it's a little hard to read. Bringing it down to parking infrastructure. The space is quite small for it to allow the parking for it to equal the access that this space gets. A lot of people bike in from town or hike into town. But things we did come to concern with are reducing the parking that is along the roadside. There's a lot of trampling going on, and then people just tend to park further and further out from the sides of the roadway. So that can be an issue with the conservation and impacts that we want to see at the site. And then also ADA parking did become a concern as we move forward, thinking about limiting where parking is allowed at the space, still giving access to those people that can't start up all the way at the trailhead. From our systems diagram, we moved into identifying desired conditions. This is a list of these desired conditions from the site. You'll see that there's 7 of them. Keep in reference these reference numbers. They'll be used on a future table. But some of the examples we have up here are visitor use aligns with conservation goals, low impact choices. We also have safety, and then also inclusivity and equitability at the site. These desired conditions were also listed with an asset, which was what we spoke about in the background info, speaking out human and natural and systems, and then also a character from the previous systems diagram that I showed. Next, we're going to look at actionable strategies. So those desired conditions were then brought into what we had looked at in our systems diagram and actionable improvements that we could make to the space, leading to putting in a management concern of high, low, or medium. As you can see, the numbers are based off of the desired conditions, and then the actionable strategies are listed under a site characteristic. We'll break it down a little bit closer. So parking and trailhead amenities we have listed here. Let's look at defining parking areas and driving restrictions. They include 4 of the desired conditions, and they're primary in the whole actionable strategy list were identified and brought together to equal a management concern of high, as it had the largest number of 5 primary and secondary impact desired conditions. These desired conditions were also then, with the systems diagram, brought into a site improvement plan that the Crested Butte Land Trust helped build. This is still in its draft phases, and we plan to keep building this into its final draft by the end of June and into summer implementation for 2025. 3 things I learned through this project is that project management takes time. The time scale was ever changing from looking at grant cycles to contracting individuals to help support us with those grant cycles. And then also navigating contrasting values in the committee meetings that we ran, with bringing together ranchers and recreationalists, and then also people that are running businesses in the region that use this space. You can find that a lot of their values can sometimes have differing meanings. So just trying to find a balance of having everybody come to consensus or at least compromise is very important. And then proactive stewardship in a public access space is the most important to me moving forward. I would love to just make more actionable strategies happen more proactively instead of reactively in the Upper Gunnison Valley. These are my references, and I would like to thank the Crested Butte Land Trust for being an amazing community sponsor and allowing me to develop this project with my own creative intake. And then also Western, I would like to thank my mentor, Dominique Nacarado, and all those others that supported me through the project, as well as the committee that we created for the support of the site improvements. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions. I need Lindsay to log me in again. As she's doing that, Mars, what was the thing that most excites you about this project?
Oh gosh, I think I could talk loud enough.
The thing that excites me the most about this project, I think I live in Crested Butte, so the space is really important to me because I recreate at Gunsight Bridge. So it is space that I use weekly. And then also my passion for recreation is quite extensive. You can find me recreating at any time of the year. So I think just being able to find the balance in space that I find important, especially when I was seeing the use at this space negatively impacting the natural environment, it definitely was high on my list of concerns. So I think just managing the space well is where I got excited.
We have time for about 2 more questions in this. So what resources do you think are most needed to balance recreation and conservation in your project area?
To balance rec and conservation in my project area, I think the most important resource is having open conversations. So the committee was very helpful because we were able to bring together a large swath of different stakeholders from the region and be able to have open conversations so we can make sure the site improvements that we choose to do don't conflict with any values that need to be upheld at the highest priority.
And then the last question, what tell us about your timeline, and was 1 year enough to get the planning project done? And if you had more time, what would you do?
Yeah. I guess you could always say that more time would be more beneficial. I mean, more meetings would be nice. We were able to reach a good amount of stakeholders, but even the National Forest Service, we were not able to have on our list of committees members. So I think just having more time to expand that committee could be helpful. And then I would also just say the time that we had, we were still able to come up with a great site improvement plan. So I'm excited to just see where it moves from here, because it's not over yet. So yeah.
Thanks very much, George. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Paige. Yeah, and if you want to, you can.
Hi, everybody. My name is Paige Atkinson. I am a MEM candidate in the Sustainable and Resilient Communities track, and my project focused on pathway program plan for the Pathways program to be housed at the Center of Public Lands here at Western. So a lot of my project focused on ensuring we are creating a system that will produce the folks that Mars was working with to ensure that there are passionate, skilled folks to do this work that has lasting impacts and in communities across the United States. So the identification of need. A lot of folks come to Western, come to Gunnison, having recreated in the past. Folks have been outdoors, they've been camping, they have history with mountain biking, with rock climbing, skiing, fishing. For me personally, I spent a lot of time on the California coast, spending years going up and down, surfing, camping, spent time with family and friends. And that's where my passion for public lands kind of stems. But how do we take this passion and turn it into a career? How do I do the thing I love for a longer period of time? Thinking about how to address that question, we wanted to create a system that was easy to identify with, something that anybody could look at and be like, oh, I can see how that works for me. I can see how I can move through that and be flexible. We've all seen that there's been a large shift in how public lands will be managed within the federal landscape with this new administration. And I think that really highlights how vulnerable these communities can be. So we wanted to create a system that was able to adapt not only to an individual's needs, but to a larger system needs. We wanted it to focus on career readiness, ensuring folks had the skills not only to be qualified candidates or applicants, but exemplary applicants, and be able to really find places where their skills would be really highlighted and align with their passions and what they want to do long term. So knowing all of that, we came up with the Pathways program and developing a mission and a vision statement that you can see here. I'm really focusing on trying to build that bridge, finding ways to connect folks, students, participants here at Western to the careers they want to see themselves doing. This is a program plan, so there was a lot of vision planning. Spent a lot of time ensuring that what we thought the system or this program should look like would align with the needs of students and future participants. But what would that look like? And these are all great thoughts, but let's try and put words to it. We created a logic model and we worked kind of backwards, starting at what we wanted the impacts to look like, going through outputs, inputs, and then also acknowledging that there are external factors that come into play with a system or a program such as this. Some of the impacts, I know the text might be a little bit small, include protected and resilient public lands, ecosystems, and an ongoing well-qualified pool of applicants for public land management positions. I think the outputs are what really got us thinking the most and kind of spurred the program development and how we designed things fitting together. I think it's also important to acknowledge the external factors at play. This is a program that will be hosted here at Western through the Center for Public Lands. And there are a lot of benefits that come with being housed at a university campus, but there are also other limitations. You're limited to the students who come to this place. You're limited to the folks who hear about the system and want to participate in a program such as this. And another external factor is funding. System or programs like this take funding to run well and ensuring that it's not a one-off, but a continuous system or program for future years. So knowing what we want it to look like, we came up with this kind of career ladder or way that folks could achieve this program centered around your academic degree. There is a foundation that comes with academics in ensuring that you have the skill or the basis knowledge to be a strong candidate and really support upward development. Building off of the academic degree is service learning. Often this is done in partnership with professors here at Western. There are numerous courses offered across departments that kind of check this box. I had a really fun time looking through the course catalog and being able to see that it's not just courses here within the Clark School, but across many departments across here at Western that kind of do this. I think it's great to see that being spread across this place. But then also recognizing the importance of volunteer and internships and seasonal positions. Internships and volunteer experience give folks the opportunity to get hands-on experience and see if this actually would be a good fit, gaining skills along the way. These are all intertied. There are a lot of, or through your academic degree, you get experience of service learning. From service learning, you might hop over to a volunteer opportunity or fellowship or an internship, or you might start up here and work your way all throughout the thing. It's not meant to be a linear progression because we recognize that we wanted something that was adaptable and able to pivot with the needs of a participant. Building off of that, we wanted also limitless opportunities can be freeing, but they also can be overwhelming. This is just another way of kind of thinking about how this program is structured. Sometimes folks know about what they want their academic base to be, or they know what they want their future career to be. But what about, they don't know how to get all those other pieces. How do I find that internship? What is that volunteer experience that would really help make me or take me that next step forward? From there, we developed what we were calling guided pathways, and they're listed off there to the right or left. And these are just common career aspirations that CPL has heard from students that they've interacted with, and just common themes across public lands management. These guided pathways are not meant to be limiting or meant to put boundaries on the program, but merely serve as a starting point for participants to kind of get themselves thinking about how they can move through those graphics that I outlined earlier. Additionally, we do see that there could be graduate grading pathways. Those look a little bit different than the undergraduate degrees, but recognizing the importance in providing structure for all students here at Western. An example of what one of those guiding pathways, or two examples, what they might look like. And again, These are meant to be inspirations, not limiting. We tried to find different ways that folks could get internships or different service learning opportunities. Yeah, and yeah, guiding pathways. Another key thing we wanted to focus on was career readiness, and we took inspiration from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, highlighting their 8 core competencies, about what it means to be career ready. We developed this chart to kind of help folks map out how they're addressing these competencies throughout the program, with the addition of field-specific knowledge and skills down here at the bottom, recognizing that there are skills that might not have been addressed up above. Like you need to know how to run a chainsaw if you want to go into wildland firefighting, a valuable skill that might not come up in a volunteer experience or in service learning. Yeah, the idea is that a participant would kind of work their way through this diagram in collaboration with CPL staff or a mentor to ensure that they are addressing these competencies across their the steps and the pathways, and just get them thinking about how they want to structure future experiences. So looking forward, as I said earlier, this is a program plan, so it's not in place yet, but hopefully that will start very, very soon. We did develop a seasonal kind of calendar of how CPL could implement this program, structuring or looking at what should happen in the fall, winter, spring, etc., while also acknowledging that partnership development and participant recruitment is a year-long process. It takes time to develop strong partnerships and can take time to get the word out, get folks excited about participating in this program. And I know Bianka will talk about what recruitment looks like in a coming presentation. Yeah, so we're hoping that a version of the Pathways program can be implemented within the next academic year. And I'm really excited to see how this program grows and it adapts in response to participants' needs and the ever-changing landscape that is stewardship careers. And with that, I just like to thank first CPL for hosting me and allowing me to do my project with them. It's been a really great opportunity, especially working with Dr. Bridget. She's been a really great support throughout this process. My family, my friends, really great support network. My fellow MEMers, some of which supported photos highlighted throughout the presentation. The communities that I've lived and worked in leading up to my time in this program, but then also the ecosystems and landscapes that continue to inspire me to pursue this work and hopefully for years to come do this work. So thank you so much.
I have to personally thank Paige for her vision and for taking ideas and making them operational. She's got a good way of thinking and asking questions and really refining. So in that, we do have a few questions online. The first is, do you think the use of AI to customize guided pathways for each student and create more opportunities would be a part of this program?
I think that's definitely a possibility. I think AI is a really great tool that could be used not only in developing those guided pathways, but throughout this program overall. I think it is a tool that needs to be used consciously and ensuring that it's not focusing or it doesn't become a crutch, and it is used to help expand opportunities and expand the lens rather than, limiting things.
And the second question, if you could choose a top skill to have pathway students develop in their time at Western, which would you choose?
That is a great question. I think the skills piece really is fluid based off of what a student wants to leave pathways with. I think a overarching skill would be good communication. Communication skills, not only like publicly like presenting like we're doing now, or folks are doing throughout this week. But then also interpersonal communications, knowing how to talk to somebody who has like-minded ideas, but then also somebody who might have dissenting ideas to what you do. And ensuring that you can have a positive and productive conversations, even when those topics get a little bit tricky, can be really important to develop.
So what excited you and got you involved in this project?
You excited me and got me involved with this project.
I did not pay her.
No, you presented this you had this idea, and it was really great to be able to work with you to kind of take this nebulous idea and try and develop a structure that somebody could move through. It did take a lot of back and forth. These graphics are probably like the 7th or 8th different iteration. And having conversations with folks who impacted and shaped what these looked like. At one point, we did have like a traditional stair-step ladder, but through conversations with folks at the Clark School, fellow MEM students, we identified that might feel limiting or feel limiting or exclusionary. So we tried to develop something that was a little bit more inclusive, fluid.
All right. With that, we're going to say thank you, Paige, for your work. And I'll turn the mic over to Bianca.
And here is your clicker. I use the podium. I don't know, use the podium. I want to feedback the mics. Testing. Oh, you can hear me. All right, cool.
Does that work?
Yeah, you move it a little closer. I'm a little tall. All right, I'm going to try really hard to use, which is the laser pointer? Hold on. The middle one? Okay, I always get really excited about laser pointers and then forget to use them. So I'm going to do my best here. My project is sort of a narrowed focus on what Paige just presented. So I'll be talking about pathways to stewardship and how to expand access to conservation careers. Primarily, I'm focusing on how do we engage conservationists from non-traditional backgrounds. And that's a word that you'll hear me use throughout the presentation. So everyone always says the outdoors is for everyone. So why aren't the careers? And this conversation sort of spurred the work that I did in this project. And there's 3 main conversations that we have as a result of us seeing this. The first is that the conservation workforce primarily lacks diversity. That's a fact. It limits the perspectives that we're able to have. And overall, it limits the effectiveness that we're able to have in the field. The second conversation is that underrepresented communities often face barriers to entry into conservation careers. This is something that we see in both urban and rural areas, no matter where you live. It's just difficult to enter the conservation career. I invite most of you to reflect what difficulties did it take to get you to where we are today. And overall, this project is aiming to develop more inclusive recruitment strategies and advocate for better hiring practices that value non-traditional backgrounds, so we're able to have more conversations about what that looks like. And that's important because conservation isn't just taking, tree diameter at breast height. It isn't just collecting field samples. This is a field that goes into legislation, policy, education, grant making, and grant giving. So we're having to ask ourselves, who are we not seeing in these conversations, and who are we leaving out of these very important critical decisions? So I want to frame this as monoculture versus biodiversity. Nature shows us that there is strength in diversity. In nature, monocultures tend to be vulnerable to pests, to disease, to climate shifts. And in conservation, we see that same thing happening. Monocultures within the workforce leave us vulnerable to blind spots, to groupthink, as well as to public mistrust. And I want to frame that by saying in biodiverse ecosystems, they're more resilient to a lot of the environmental stressors that we see popping up continuously. They help foster innovation through species interactions and relationships. And most importantly, they help to ensure redundancy. If we see one species or one ecosystem failing to thrive, something will inevitably step in to take advantage of that. And that mirrors diverse workforces as well. The more people, the more variety of people you have sitting at a table, the better you're able to adapt to the changing problems and complexities that we're seeing in conservation and environmentalism. We're able to incorporate wider worldviews and alternative knowledge systems. Lately, we've all seen traditional ecological knowledge pop up in conversation. And that's one of those things that we value from diverse workforces. And most importantly, we're able to build trust with communities that not only have been historically excluded from these discussions, decisions, but that we're directly attempting to impact in the conservation work that we do. If we keep building these teams that all think the same, we're limiting the solutions that we're imagining and who we're imagining them for. And so all of that comes up and we have to fix that in hindsight, which only creates more issues. But more than just me sitting up here preaching, let's look at what the data tells us. It's laser pointer time. So this study is a 2014 look at gender and race statistics in specifically conservation science and forestry, because that's what we're focusing on here. Overwhelmingly, we're seeing that a majority of white people are dominating the conservation science and forestry industry. Is that a problem? No. Can it be improved upon? Absolutely. We typically see a division of about 70% men of all races to 30% women. In this slide, it's showing us about 71.2 men to 28.8 women across the board. And even when we just look at gender demographics, there tends to be about a $10,000 pay gap in just that. We're not seeing any inclusion from Indigenous folks, very minimal from people of 2 or more races, Black folks. There's almost no Black women there. I'm doing my best, but I'm only one person. And that's staggering to see. This is in 2014. This is not the same slide, contrary to popular belief. This is 8 years later. What has changed? Almost nothing. Everything that we've been able to do in our field, and these numbers are still not making any progression. This translates to a higher increase in men. We're seeing about 28.2% men in 2022, compared to a drop in women that we're seeing in conservation science down to 27.2. And in the year 2022, we're seeing that about 91.5 of conservation scientists and forestry individuals were white. Again, is this a problem? No. But this is something that can definitely be improved upon. The 2 statistics that made a slight jump is going to be people of 2 or more races I'm representing, jumping to a staggering 4.08%. Wow, very impressive. And then we're going to see Black individuals coming in at a whopping 1.88%. Not a lot's been done here. This isn't just something that I'm talking about because it's important. I'm a strong believer that your workforce demographic should mirror the demographics of who you're serving, right? All right, well, this is comparing the 2022 race versus national level. If we look all the way over here, the only time you're going to see a demographic of people in the workforce exceed the national average is in the constituency of white conservation scientists. You're not going to see it for Black individuals, for Natives, for Asians, or anything else across the board. So this is a fundamental problem in not just conservation science, but I'm willing to bet that this mirrors a lot of other workforces. Nationally, the math is not adding up to what we like to see. BIPOC representation is low. This lack of diversity is giving us blind spots in not only policy and decision-making, but it's giving us reduced community trust. If most of us tried in this room to reach out to communities where we do want to recruit from, how difficult is it going to be to build that relationship from the ground up? And this isn't just something that's inconsequential. We're seeing recent federal actions setting back all of this amazing progress that we've done in 8 years. These federal actions are setting us back. The EPA alone has canceled 800 environmental justice grants that have been directly targeted to improve climate resiliency in vulnerable areas. This is a problem. It's not just affecting our jobs, it's affecting the people who have to navigate these difficulties regularly. So what are we doing about it? Well, we're looking at what target communities are we not seeing. To no one's surprise, we're going to be reaching out directly to BIPOC students, to first generation undergraduate and graduate students. We're going to be reaching out to women, to LGBTQ+ individuals, to Indigenous communities. And the thing that I really want to drive home is urban and rural communities. We often see urban and rural communities have large demographics of underserved youth that are not being reached out to. And oftentimes, despite how different life is in big cities compared to very small rural towns, these high school age students are seeing the same problems, the same difficulties, not only in entry into academia, but into their desired career choices. So we're creating a pathway for non-traditional conservationists, and we're going to attack this from 3 different standpoints: awareness and inspiration, exposure and experience, and then retention and leadership. We're primarily targeting high school to undergraduate students because that's when we're all figuring it out. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at awareness and inspiration. We're going to want to do experiential exposure. We're going to want to introduce these students to public land careers. I don't want a show of hands, but how many people have you heard of who are like, well, when I grow up, I want to be a biologist. I want to be a vet. And that's one career field. Everybody in this room has a different job than everybody else. And that's very narrowed, very targeted. Why aren't we exposing students to these kinds of things? We're also going to focus on paid summer programs. That means giving students stipends, gears, bus passes so they have equitable access to travel to and from these jobs, scholarships. And we want to encourage a diverse curriculum unit in biology and environmental science so students are aware that there's more than one job in just veterinary science or being a park ranger. These are very diverse career fields. Then we're going to jump to exposure and experience. We're going to want to be recruiting at cultural student orgs and student unions. We want you to be going to those Black student unions, Latino clubs, LGBTQ plus clubs, because you might be gay and you want to be a conservationist. You might be Latino and you want to work in forestry. These things are not mutually exclusive, and there needs to be more uncomfortable positions where we directly go into these communities and recruit. We also want to, like Paige focused on, promote service learning. I worked in my career field for a very long time before entering grad school, and it gave me a diverse perspective on what it means to be in this field of work. And there's great opportunities with some of our local and federal agencies like Colorado Parks and Wildlife, like the Bureau of Land Management. We're also going to want to offer free or low-cost rentals of gear. All of us in this room probably recreate to the point where we have, too much stuff that's spilling over into sheds and garages. And this stuff takes time to build up. Something as simple as hiking boots and layers can really take it out of somebody's budget to be able to do the work that they want to do. And offering free or low-cost rentals of this gear or providing them resources to gear libraries is really important, and making sure that these students feel supported in their career paths. And the most important things are matching students with mentors that have similar lived experiences. It took me until I was in my late 20s to find a mentor that I really resonated with. And even then, we were not of the same race. We were not of the same sexuality. So imagine how much that means to somebody trying to enter their career path at 18. And then when we look at retention and leadership, it's things like creating fellowships and funding assistantships. When I was entering my undergraduate career, I had a scholarship that provided me 50% off tuition as a result of one summer internship that I did. And were it not for that, I don't think I would be standing here today. These little things mean a lot to students without the means to be able to pursue these things. We're going to want to support students to develop this community-based work. We want them directly interacting with the communities that they come from, so we're able to understand what that community's relationship is to conservation. And we're going to want to do things like demystifying the academic process. A lot of times these students are first generation. They don't have anybody to rely on or to offer them support. And something like pursuing not only a career in conservation, but entering academia is terrifying to them. And we need to make them understand that there's more than one option to do that. And there's multiple pathways to be able to achieve that. And that this is the work that we're doing. Externally. So what are we doing internally as parties who hire, parties who recruit? The first thing is that language matters. I am so tired of hearing about how I'm a diverse person, or I'm, in DEI, I'm one person. I don't create a diverse atmosphere. I just walk into a room. We want to value qualified people through these experiences, through their leadership, through their insight. Don't call people DEI or diverse candidates and hires. We want to talk about community connected conservationists. I don't care about things like soft skills and unskilled labor. That's a myth. I want to talk about what relational skills do you have? What field experience do you bring to the table? What is your cultural fluency that I need to tap into in order to make sure that this ecosystem prevails? And one thing that you're going to notice that neither Paige nor I said is the word pipeline. There is no direct pipeline into conservation. There's very diverse paths of how we all get here. We're going to talk about resilient hiring, not DEI hiring. We're talking about broadening the knowledge base. And at the end of the day, we're redefining what conservation looks like. We're not creating more conservationists. We're opening the pathway to what that work is. Don't just say it, be it. If you're going to put a target on a student's back, be willing to defend them and support them throughout the process. Do not tokenize these students. Rely on your partnerships. There's a lot of NGOs that are already out there doing the work in conservation, and they make amazing partners. And remember to put people first. There's a quote that I want to end with that says, "The best conservation solutions are rooted in community, shaped by lived experience, and made stronger through diverse experience." And I think that is the root of the work that we all do. So I want to give a quick thank you to Western, to the Center for Public Lands, to my advisor, Bridget, to Crystal Egley, my board chair for Hunters of Color, as well as Paige and Bradley, who have also helped me in this work. And thank you.
I have to say this audience, okay, this audience is good because we already have questions queued. So you've been trained and you're doing great. Questions for you, Bianca.
Okay.
How does identity impact conservation outcomes when the curricula is the same?
So I got a biology degree from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and we all went through the same classes. I think what mattered to me is that I was always stepping into spaces where I was not the majority. I always brought a different worldview. I come from an indigenous background. I'm indigenous Mexican along with Gullah Geechee Black. And the way that both groups of people view their relationship to the land is very different from what we see in Western conservation. The essay that I wrote when I first entered the Clark School of Environmental Science is I tore apart the Western model of conservation. One of the things that I hate about it that I think is garbage is that it doesn't include people in that relationship, right? It puts us over the land, but no matter if we're scientists, if we're conservationists, if we're community members, we're all interacting with the environment in different ways. And that, I think, is ultimately what makes a stronger conservation realm.
There's a lot of really good questions coming up.
I think my boss is watching, so he might have planted those.
No, so we'll also wait, because some of these will come back when we can talk to the whole group. Can you give any examples of how to diversify biology and environmental science curriculum?
I think one of the things that I'm going to lean really heavily on is traditional ecological knowledge. Conservation work's been happening since before we've had rigid academic structures. So just opening students up to those different perspectives is really important. I think also, doing some of those skills, like actually putting students in the environment. I know a couple of us were in environmental education, and that experiential learning really opens up a perspective of what a student is able to do. It's more difficult to teach those skills if you're not directly interacting with them. And I grew up in Chicago. So the first time I went out and looked at compost, I was like, wow, that's the coolest thing. And that's something that people take for granted, but including that in my curriculum as a 7th grader was amazing to me. So I think really just taking students out of the classroom when you're able to, and also having more diverse career paths exposed to them in the classroom. Every teacher is a teacher because they like seeing students grow. And a lot of that happens outside of a standard desk with pens and papers or tablets. I don't know what they're using now.
Thanks, Bianca. And our last presenter, I'm going to turn the mic over to Caleb. Which mic do you want? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that was a heck of a presentation to follow, but I will try my best. So, hello all. I am Caleb Park. I am in the Employees program here at Western Colorado University, so getting a Master's of Environmental Management and Ecology. And so for this presentation, I'm really talking about my environmental management side of things. So I was tasked with telling the story of Rizoo Ranch, which is a ranch that Western acquired back in 2023. And this presentation is hopefully going to tell that story. So what and where is Rizoo Ranch? So we're going to start off. This is the state of Colorado, and hopefully, yes, cool. Rizoo Ranch is a 40-acre property up in Crested Butte, and it borders the Slate River. And it is a wet meadow habitat property, wetland property, that supports a diverse wildlife of birds, small mammals, some larger mammals, and then insects. It has 3 recreation trails that intersect it. So the yellow one, there it is. Yellow one right here is the boardwalk trail. There is a road that intersects the entire property, represented in the pink. And then there is a river trail towards the northern part of the property that goes along the Slate River. So I'm just going to give a brief history of the Verzuz Ranch, and where it started and where it's ended up today. So all the way back dating to the 16th century, the Utes, Mountain Ute tribe came into the valley and stewarded the land for a very long time until Western settlement decided to come along and push them out. And so that was around the late 1800s is when Western settlers started settling in the Gunnison Valley. And around the late 1870s to 1880 is when Crested Butte was established as a mining town. And so the Verzuz family was part of this family that owned some land that was up there, but they were also important family within the Crested Buttes. Within the Crested Butte town, they had a Verzuz general store right within town, and then they owned a lot of land out east of town. So in the late 1900s, Bill Lacey owns the land, and during that time, around the early 2000s, or 2000 exactly, is when the town was, or when the property was annexed into the town of Crested Butte. And so this happened, there were lots and open lands that were east of the main part of town that were annexed into the town. And so they were annexed with the idea that some of it would be left open for open space, but also some of it would be developed for lands and houses and plots. And so then in 2015, Wynn and Ryan Martin purchased the Verzuz Ranch specifically. And I deem this the restoration era because they looked at this land and they had they looked at this land with a conservation mind and restoration mind focus for the land. They wanted to restore it to the previous wetland that it was. They looked at it and saw that it had been overgrazed. There was a lot of monoculture of grazing grasses on the land, and so that was what they wanted to do. And so they brought researchers. They definitely had a conservation focus, but research-based conservation that they wanted to push. And then late 2023, the Martins donated this land to Western Colorado University, where it is today in ownership. So why does this ranch matter so much to the landscape and to Western Colorado University? So it is a wetland ecosystem. It is a wet meadow ecosystem. And in the American West, the landscape only covers about, wetlands in the American West only cover about 2% or less than 2% of the landscape. But 60 to 80% of all wildlife rely on wetlands during some part of their life cycle. And so these are crucial habitats to preserve and conserve and restore where we can. It also has the potential to be a big mosaic of wetland habitats. So microhabitats across any kind of ecosystem, especially wetlands, provide for increased biodiversity within these ecosystems. And so the idea with the land is that it has been used as grazing land in the past, but restoring that mosaic is part of that crucial aspect to restoring the biodiversity within this land. And then also it connects people with nature, not only with the recreation trails that are present on the property, because there's a lot of recreation that happens on this, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but this also connects students at Western now with this landscape, this living laboratory that you can go out and witness and put into practice active conservation strategies, and kind of going back to being out and having that active type of learning with students. So who lives on the ranch? So there have been 90 species of birds recorded on the ranch since 2020. So 2020 started a bird surveys that we'll be getting into a little bit later. But 90 species have been recorded on the ranch, with 40 of those species being showing breeding behavior. And a couple of those species that are super common on the ranch are our little savanna sparrow, which enjoy wet meadow habitats, but also grassland habitats. And then our Wilson snipe, which prefer more of the wetland habitats, more water, basically. And then these were done during surveys. Birds were observed during surveys. We didn't have any surveys for any other kinds of animals, but we have anecdotal evidence of other animals that exist on the ranch. So mammals can range anywhere from deer mice to pocket gophers, to foxes, and then both elk and black bear have been seen on the ranch. And so these are camera traps that were set up on the boardwalk that ended up capturing a couple of our resident mammals. The bottom left is a deer mice, and the top right is our resident fox that enjoys using the boardwalk to get from place to place. So Verzoo Ranch has been the definition of science in action ever since the Martins took it over. They really wanted to have this research-based restoration and conservation mind focused towards it. And so part of that science in action has been the bird surveys that have been conducted since 2020. And these were mainly tracking basically phenology, which is looking at different types of species that are on the ranch, and then the variation in those individual species on the ranch, but also just individuals on the ranch in general. So that's looking at how those differences track across the year. And so this graph is just kind of showing the different numbers of species that were observed between 2020 and 2022, showing the peak in the breeding season between June and July, and then going down to almost no birds being recorded in December. And then along with these surveys, we looked at flush distances and monitored nest boxes. So looking at flush distances, seeing how recreation or people present on the property were potentially affecting different species of birds. And then monitoring nest boxes, seeing if these nest boxes were being occupied by native individuals, and then the success rates of those individuals. And so then I also conducted I myself conducted a public recreation monitoring back in 2022, where I set up camera traps across the trails and recorded differences in recreation activity across those trails, but also what kind of recreation activity happened. And so really, the main point of this was to look at recreation trends during breeding season, because we know recreation affects birds breeding, causing them to flush when they don't need to flush, causing them to exert energy when they don't need to exert energy. And so the idea was combining these recreation activities with the breeding activity that we see during our bird surveys. And this is just a general graph of the recreation that's happened on the property, with biking actually being at a very, very top of it. Another thing that's actively happening on the property is sustainable land management. So this involves managing the land, stewarding the land properly as it needs to recover from the previous grazing practices that have happened on the land. So part of that is this idea of rotational grazing, which this amazing GIF shows. The idea with rotational grazing is you're dynamically moving cattle across the landscape in order not to overgraze or undergraze areas of the landscape that require grazing as part of their natural cycle to restore the vegetative structure across the whole landscape. And so this is done by utilizing fences, dynamic fences that you can move from location to location. And so this picture shows some Western students moving some of that electric fencing that we were moving cattle into later on, I think in that week that we were doing that. But just an idea of sustainable land management. And then active restoration that's been happening on the land. So back in 2019, the Martins partnered with NRCS and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and built a whole pond wetland ecosystem within the ranch. And that's, trying to be shown between 2019 and that's today. But this is just showing the restoration that even the Martins put into it. And this contributes to that mosaic of land diversity that we're hoping to see in the future, even more emphasized in the future on this landscape to bring back that biodiversity that the wetlands create, but also create a better habitat for the birds and animals, mammals, insects, and ideally vegetation that will influence the land later on. And then back in the fall of 2019, or sorry, not fall of 2019, last fall, we did a soil lift, which was restoring some stream bank restoration. So this is against the Slate River. And it was a degraded landscape that had been used as kind of a put in, but also kind of a recreation area in the past for people to go up and walk up to the water and play in it. But it was degraded wetland ecosystem that was riparian ecosystem that was bordering the Slate River. And so we went in and did a soil lift, which was increasing the soil level all the way up to the banks, and then inserting cuts of willows to try to stem that growth and restore the vegetative structure that you can see all along the riparian habitat along the Slate River up in Crested Butte. And so just to kind of close off, Verzoo Ranch is an amazing living landscape, and it's a learning living laboratory that Western now has to educate a lot of students in and educate public as well. And it is a big crossroads for education, wildlife, stewardship, research, and restoration. And it creates this unique opportunity for us to practice stewardship right out our back door and allow our students to have that extra opportunity to practice stewardship in their sense. And with that, I'd just like to thank advisors Hannah Carroll and Pat McGee, the Martins definitely, Joey Carpenter, Crested Butte Museum, Marcella and Kristen for doing previous studies as well. And with that, oh yeah.
We're going to give Caleb 2 questions, and then we'll turn it back over to the full panel for some questions. So how can the Verzoo Ranch be used as a model for future wetland preservation efforts, and what lessons can be learned from it?
So I think the idea with the Verzoo Ranch is it is going to become that model of how wetlands can be restored from. So I think one of the biggest things with wetlands, especially in this area, is the grazing practices that have been historically placed on it. It's just been overgrazed. Vegetative communities have died off from that. And so a lot of the focus is restoring proper grazing activities and also restoring some of those more important vegetative communities. So with what the Martins have started, and then with what Western will hopefully continue to do with their students, with their professors, with other researchers, will be restoring the water back into the ecosystem, restoring those riparian habitats. I didn't show this, but on the property, even further in from the Slate River, there's already some restored willows that are trying to increase that mosaic again. And so ideally, this is just what will continue with the ranch being owned by Western now.
And next question is, what opportunities might exist for youth land back on the Verzoo Ranch?
Ooh, that is a good question. I haven't been specifically involved in that, but we had a Mountain Ute tribe member come to the opening ceremony that we had for the Verzoo Ranch once Western acquired it. And I feel like the best potential way to do that is to include them is keep in conversation with them, learn about how they used to steward the land, and apply that to our stewardship of the land, apply that to how we can better the land, because we're coming into this land with some knowledge, and that's why research is great and constant monitoring is great. But people that have been on this land much longer than us, who have stewarded it for centuries, will probably have the down low on what's good, what's easy, or what's important with restoration practices. So just including them in the conversation and including them in the active management, I think, of the land would be a good start.
We're gonna walk over. So from the applause, I think that you all are as inspired as I am with these folks and their vision for conservation and what is the possibility in it. And along those lines, we have some more excellent, thank you for keeping the questions coming. Questions for you. So the first one for the panel actually goes to Bianca and Paige. Inclusivity seems to be the theme of your presentation. How would you promote inclusivity in a society that is quite exclusive?
So one of the things that I was recently at the Colorado Partners in the Outdoors conference, and one of the things that I heard from the keynote speaker that resonated with me is that DEI isn't something you do. It's something you incorporate into every aspect. You know, like I don't wake up every day and say, I'm going to do DEI. I wake up and I say, I'm going to take underrepresented communities into the outdoors so they can experience it. And I think reframing inclusion is something that gets done in a bubble as opposed to something that you just incorporate into an everyday part of your life is really important. If you're in a room of people who look exactly like you, maybe reframe that. Give yourself an opportunity to be uncomfortable and to grow from that situation.
Yeah, just building off that, inclusivity isn't a box to be checked. It's a system of thinking that I think we all need to ensure we're incorporating in all of the actions we're taking. It's not a component, it's a foundational piece that should be will support the work from the ground up.
This is for the whole group. What is one aspect that could have enhanced your projects?
Ooh, I feel like the one thing that could have enhanced my project or the project I did with the Crestview Land Trust at Gunsight Bridge is potentially having more years of monitoring data at the site. We did start looking at like the amount of people that are parking at the trailhead area or where these social trails are getting developed and how many users are using those social trails. But the years that we had in data for those have only been in recent as of after COVID. So I would say definitely just hoping in the future to have more monitoring data to use for future projects.
I think time too. I would have loved to see this be implemented, and I cannot wait to watch this program plan be implemented and see the work done through it. In a perfect world, I'd be here to help do that and then be able to help pivot the program where necessary and where participants want to see it led. But I'm really excited to see CPL continue this work moving forward.
Okay, I have to not say time. I think one thing that I've seen in the research that I have been doing when it comes to my project is that you're going to see a lot of industries, a lot of partners, a lot of agencies not tracking that demographic information, because once you track it and you notice that there's a discrepancy, then you have to act on it, right? So I think I would like to see that more. I think seeing better tracked data, more demographics, and being fully transparent about whether or not there is an issue in recruitment and hiring practices would really help better solve that problem.
Probably with mine, I feel like something that could enhance it would be maybe sitting down with more individuals, talking about the historical context of Crested Butte and the lands that Grizzly Ranch used to be used for, and then even before Western settlement, what ancestors used to use it for even then. Really trying to hone in on that storytelling aspect of it. Yeah, I probably would have.
I like this game, pass the head. The last question that we have time for is brings up something that has been on everybody's mind lately, but how do we sustain commitment to conservation in the face of federal defunding?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, my sister, she's supposed to have an AmeriCorps position and she is struggling with that right now. So it's definitely amongst all of us right now. I would say reaching out to private funding is definitely an opportunity that still exists out there for those that are like properly trying to implement projects at the moment to enhance conservation in spaces that you might be involved in. I don't know, I'll keep passing the mic and see what else we can come up with.
Yeah, I think pivoting and really ensuring that folks on a local level have the resources available to continue the work is really important, but then also poking the folks at the federal level and ensuring that it's uncomfortable and they recognize that, like, sure, somebody can say you don't have to do it, but it's not, or just because you say you can't do it doesn't mean that the greater issue you're trying to solve goes away. So yes, pivot, try to find alternative funding, ensure that this amazing work continues, but then shout at the top of the mountain that, like, there's an issue, a larger issue that comes without that federal support, and it's just as necessary 4 years from now as it was 5 years ago, and will continue to be for years to come.
I literally wake up and think about this. I work for a BIPOC hunting organization, so shout out Hunters of Color. But this has been plaguing my thoughts. I think one of the things that we've started doing is really relying on those partnerships. I think a lot of the challenges that we're facing, not only as an organization, but in the realm of conservation as a whole, are really going to show you which partners were committed to your mission and which partners were checking boxes. And that's a really good differentiation of who you want involved in the work that you do. And then also pivoting the language. So I work with a lot of natural resource organizations. And I'm gonna call on Texas. Sorry for any Texans, but here in Colorado, we like to do a lot of conservation work, a lot of education work, and Texas doesn't really see the value of creating BIPOC hunters in and of itself. But what I do tell them is like, well, I'm creating license purchases for you. I'm creating users for your system. Do you want more revenue and funding? Then it's got to be a reciprocal relationship. So I think, you know, sometimes doubling down in situations like that also really helps continue those conservation pathways.
Yeah, I think kind of adjusting to, or kind of piggybacking off of what Paige said, staying at that local level and the community level, really relying on those community in these unsure times where you don't know if there's going to be any federal government or federal funding. Yeah, if there's not going to be a federal government, yeah. But yeah, really relying on those community level sources, those community level funding. And that's honestly, like, I feel like that's really where conservation and stewardship hit home anyway, is what you're surrounded by, that community that you're surrounded by, what you're surrounded by, what you're learning from your peers, what you're learning from your neighbors. And so really focusing in on that will not only help progress, you know, conservation, but ideally we'll be able to support each other in that way.
Well, I want to say thank you to the panelists. Again, thinking about planning and then telling the stories that come from those plans is super important to the work that we do and will continue to be so. So thank you for planting your seeds, for bringing your passion and your ideas into making the world that you want to see.